I manage a gallery in Edinburgh. Last week, an American couple walked in during our contemporary installation opening. The husband stopped dead at a piece he called revolutionary. He asked what school influenced the artist. I said it was quite interesting. He beamed, thanked me for understanding his sophisticated eye. His wife nodded along. I just told them the work was derivative garbage in the politest way possible, but they spent 20 minutes telling me how galleries back home never appreciated their refined taste. They bought the smallest print we had, convinced they'd discovered genius. The artist's a student who glued bottle caps to cardboard. We keep her work around because her mum's on the council. My flatmate in Manchester works at a cafe where this American ordered tea, then got upset when the cup arrived without ice. She insisted that tea's always served cold in civilized places, citing some article she'd read about British afternoon tea traditions involving iced beverages. He tried explaining that hot tea's been our thing for centuries. She cut him off, said he'd clearly never traveled much, and launched into a lecture about how tea originated in the American South. She actually said the British borrowed the tradition from Atlanta. When he suggested she might have confused sweet tea with afternoon tea, she told him not to mansplain her own culture to her. She left a 2-star review calling the place historically inaccurate. I teach at a secondary school in Cardiff. During a school exchange program, an American teacher joined us for observations. She pulled me aside after watching my Year 10 literature class and said my students were remarkably well behaved. I mentioned they were fairly energetic today. She said I was too humble, that American educators could learn from my classroom management. I'd actually been apologizing for the fact that 3 students spent the lesson passing notes, 2 were asleep, and 1 had somehow smuggled in a hamster. She spent her remaining visit taking photos of my supposedly exemplary teaching method. Her school district invited me to give a seminar on discipline technique. I declined. I work at a theater in Bristol. Last month, an American tourist asked where the bathrooms were during the interval. I told him they were just through the doors marked toilets. He laughed and said I was obviously joking, that no respectable venue would label them so crudely. He insisted they must be called restrooms or facilities. I repeated their marked toilet. He got flustered, claimed he'd visited dozens of British theaters and never seen such lowbrow signage, then accused me of mocking him because he was American. He wandered around for 10 minutes looking for signs that said anything else, missed half the second act, then complained to management that our crude humor made him uncomfortable. We've called them toilets since 1857. My sister handles reservations at a hotel in Liverpool. She took a call from an American woman who wanted to know what time zone London was in compared to Liverpool. My sister said they're both in GMT. The caller insisted that couldn't be right, that major cities always have their own time zones, citing how New York and Los Angeles differ. My sister explained that Britain's not large enough to require multiple zones. The woman countered that she'd read Britain was a major country, so obviously it needed at least 2 or 3 zones for proper business coordination. She'd calculated a 2 p.m. check-in based on assuming Liverpool was 3 hours behind London. She asked to speak with someone who'd actually studied British geography. My sister transferred her to me. I'm a bartender. I told her the same thing. She hung up and called back an hour later demanding a different hotel chain. I deliver parcels in York. I knocked on a door and this American staying at the house asked if I needed proof of residence before releasing the package. I said the name matched, so we're fine. He launched into this explanation about how the U.S. Postal Service implemented strict verification protocols after September 11th, and surely Britain would have adopted similar measures given our shared security concerns. He insisted I was cutting corners that could compromise national safety. I told him to just take his package. He refused, said he wanted proper documentation of the chain of custody, started photographing my van's license plate as evidence of procedural violations. His landlord came out, confirmed it was his package, took it inside. The American followed him in, still shouting about transport security regulations. I delivered 17 other packages that morning without anyone requesting my credentials, my supervisor's name, or a notarized receipt. I bartended at a pub in Glasgow. An American sat down and ordered a pint, then immediately asked where the cocktail menu was. I pointed to our beer selection on the wall. He looked confused, said every decent bar has cocktails, that this couldn't be a proper establishment without at least basic mixed drink. I explained we're a traditional pub. He insisted tradition means having classics available, started listing drinks he wanted. I repeated we serve beer, whiskey, and basic spirit. He accused me of being deliberately unhelpful, said he'd been to dozens of British pubs and movies, and they always had full service. When I asked which movies, he mentioned Cheers. I noted that's set in Boston. He claimed it was based on authentic British pub culture that London exported to America in the 1700s. He stayed for 3 hours trying to explain proper pub history to locals who've been drinking here for decades. Nobody had the heart to tell him he'd been arguing with my gran, who's published 2 books on Scottish drinking establishments. My uncle manages a curry house in Birmingham. Last Tuesday, an American couple complained that their chicken tikka masala wasn't authentic Indian food. They'd done extensive research, apparently, and knew that real Indian cuisine didn't include cream-based sauces because traditional Indian cooking focused on lighter preparations. They'd watched a documentary about Mumbai street food. My uncle's from Punjab. He tried explaining tikka masala's origins, how it's a British Indian creation popular across the UK. The husband cut him off, insisting he was confused about his own heritage, that authentic meant following ancient recipes unchanged. They demanded a refund for being served fake cultural food. When my uncle mentioned he'd been making this dish for 30 years, the wife said that proved he'd been doing it wrong the entire time. They left a review warning other travelers about restaurants that don't understand their own cuisine. They recommended an Italian place down the street as more culturally respectful. I work at a chippy in Blackpool. An American walked in and ordered fish and chips, then got upset when I asked if she wanted salt and vinegar. She said vinegar didn't go on fish, that condiments were strictly salt and pepper, maybe ketchup if the place was fancy. I explained it's traditional here. She informed me she'd taken a British cooking class in Denver that never mentioned vinegar, so clearly someone had misinformed me about our own food customs. She insisted I was trying to make her look foolish by suggesting something absurd. When I showed her other customers with vinegar-soaked chips, she claimed they were tourists who didn't know better. She filmed herself explaining to her followers how British fish and chips were being corrupted by foreign influences. Her video got 6,000 views. Half the comments were Americans agreeing that vinegar on fish sounded disgusting. The other half were Brits explaining we've done this since Victorian times. I wait tables at a restaurant in Bath. This American family came in for Sunday roast. When I brought Yorkshire puddings with their meal, the father sent them back, insisting he'd ordered the roast beef, not dessert. I explained Yorkshire pudding's a savory side dish, part of the traditional meal. He countered that pudding by definition is sweet, citing the Merriam-Webster dictionary his daughter pulled up on her phone. His wife agreed this was clearly a mix-up in the kitchen. I brought them back out, still with the roast. He refused to touch them, said he wasn't paying for items he didn't order. When I noted pudding has different meanings in British English, he said we were in England so we should follow proper English definitions. He left them untouched, wrote a review about us forcing desserts on confused diners, and complained we wouldn't honor the menu descriptions. His daughter asked if we had any real food. She was holding her roast beef. My brother works at a sandwich shop in Newcastle. An American ordered a jacket potato, then stared at it confused when it arrived. She asked where the potato salad was, where the jacket part came in, why we'd just given her a plain baked potato. My brother explained that jacket potatoes what we call baked potatoes here. She insisted a jacket potato meant a potato dressed in toppings like a salad dresses lettuce, that the name indicated specific preparation involving cold elements. She'd expected mayonnaise-based sides. When he offered toppings like cheese and beans, she said those weren't jacket ingredients, those were just regular toppings. She demanded the actual jacket potato she'd ordered. He brought butter and cheese. She said jackets implied crispy exterior elements, not melted dairy. She Googled the term, found British definitions, then claimed the internet must be wrong because food names should be intuitive. She took her potato apart looking for hidden component. There weren't any. It was a potato. I drive cabs in Leeds. Last month I picked up an American who asked me to take him to Oxford Street, then got annoyed when I asked him to clarify which one. He said there's only one Oxford Street, the famous shopping district. I explained we're in Leeds, not London. He pulled out his phone showing me pictures of London's Oxford Street, insisting this was where he needed to go. When I said that's a different city about 200 miles away, he accused me of being deliberately unhelpful, that Oxford Street was a major landmark so obviously it should be nearby. He'd assumed all UK cities were essentially connected neighborhoods, like how Manhattan and Brooklyn are part of New York. I offered to take him to our city center shopping instead. He refused, said he'd specifically researched Oxford Street and booked this taxi to see the real thing. He called another taxi company. They told him the same thing. He ended up paying for a 4-hour drive to London because he refused to believe Leeds and London were separate metropolitan areas. He left me 1 star for not knowing my own city's landmark. I sell train tickets at King's Cross Station in London. An American approached the window and asked for a ticket to Gloucester. I confirmed he meant Gloucester the city, not Gloucester Road tube station nearby. He said he'd researched it thoroughly, that Gloucester was definitely his destination, showed me a screenshot of directions. I sold him the ticket. 2 hours later he was back, furious, demanding a refund. Turned out he'd wanted Gloucester Road, 5 stops away on the Underground, not Gloucester, a city 100 miles west. When I reminded him I'd specifically clarified which one, he claimed I should have known what he meant from context, that no reasonable person would travel to some random town when the tube station was obviously closer. He insisted travel agents in America would never allow such confusion, that I deliberately misdirected him to inflate prices. He demanded I personally escort him to Gloucester Road as compensation for his wasted afternoon. Our supervisor explained once again the difference between the locations. He filed a formal complaint about British rail system naming conventions being designed to trick tourists. He wanted Parliament contacted about standardization. My cousin works at Edinburgh Airport. An American complained at the information desk that her GPS wasn't working properly because it kept showing Scotland as the location instead of the United Kingdom. She'd expected it to say UK since that's what she put on her customs form. My cousin explained Scotland is part of the UK, that GPS shows specific regions within countries. The woman insisted that made no sense, that if Scotland was in the UK then GPS should just say UK, like how Texas doesn't show up separately from the United States in her phone. She demanded her phone be fixed. My cousin tried drawing diagrams showing how the UK comprises England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The woman interrupted, said she'd studied European geography extensively and knew the UK was a single unified country without internal divisions. She'd read that Scotland wanted independence, which she assumed meant they weren't actually part of the UK yet. When my cousin mentioned Scotland's been part of Britain for centuries, She said that explained the political tension she'd read about, but didn't explain why her GPS was malfunctioning. She factory reset her phone. It still said Scotland. I work at a petrol station in Brighton. An American pulled up, then walked inside asking why we didn't have the pump numbers displayed in gallons. I explained we use liters. He said that was fine for local preference, but international stations should accommodate American measurements for tourist convenience. He'd driven across Europe without this issue because, he claimed, France and Germany have dual displays. I told him they don't, they use metric everywhere. He insisted I was wrong, that he'd specifically noticed gallon measurements at a station in Paris last year. When I suggested he might have been converting mentally or misremembering, he pulled out his phone to find photos proving his point. He couldn't find any. He paid for 30 liters while muttering about poor customer service standards, then spent 5 minutes in his car with a calculator trying to determine if he'd been overcharged since he couldn't convert liters to gallons accurately. He drove off, then came back 20 minutes later asking if we'd accidentally given him diesel instead of petrol because his rental car was running differently. It was running fine. He'd just convinced himself something must be wrong with British fuel measurement. I work security at a museum in Oxford. Last month, an American tourist tapped a painting to see if it was real or a print. I asked him not to touch the artwork. He apologized, then explained he wasn't actually touching it, just using his knuckle to test the texture, which he'd learned was acceptable at art museums because skin oils only transfer from fingertip. He cited a museum studies course he'd taken online that covered proper viewing technique. I repeated that no touching was allowed. He insisted I was being overly cautious, that European museums encourage tactile engagement with art as part of the educational experience. He'd read that the Louvre allows respectful touching of certain pieces. I told him this wasn't the Louvre and these were 17th century oils. He said age didn't matter if the varnish was properly maintained, launched into a lecture about conservation techniques he'd researched before his trip. When I moved to escort him out, he pulled up articles on his phone about interactive museum experiences, demanded to speak with the curator about updating our outdated policies. The curator came down. She banned him for the day. He stood outside for an hour telling other tourists we were suppressing artistic appreciation through excessive regulation. The painting he'd tapped was worth £800,000. My girlfriend manages a bookshop in Canterbury. An American came in asking for the British literature section. She pointed him toward the fiction shelves organized by author surname. He looked confused, said he wanted specifically British authors, not mixed with everyone else. She explained most of our stock is British authors since we're in Britain. He insisted proper bookshops separate literature by country of origin so readers can explore national styles, that this was standard practice at Barnes and Noble. She suggested he look for specific authors he enjoyed. He said that wasn't the point, that he wanted to browse British writers as a category, compare their techniques to American ones. When she noted that organizing by nationality would mean splitting up alphabetical order, he claimed alphabet wasn't as important as cultural categorization. He spent 20 minutes pulling books, checking author nationalities on his phone, building his own British pile on the floor. He found 12 books. She watched him. He bought nothing, said he just wanted to see how many British authors we actually carried versus foreign ones. He'd created a bibliography. He never asked what percentage of our inventory was British. It's roughly 85%. I work at a laundrette in Southampton. An American brought in clothes and asked what our express service cost. I told him we don't offer express, just standard service done by end of day. He said every laundromat in America has express options for business travelers, that this was basic customer service 101. I explained we're a small operation, same day is our fastest. He insisted that same day by definition meant express, so we were advertising services we refused to provide. I clarified same day means ready by closing time, around 6 p.m. He'd assumed same day meant within 2 hours like in the States. He argued that laundromats globally follow American timing standards because efficiency is universal, not cultural. When I suggested he could wash them himself in our self-service machines, he said he hadn't traveled to Britain to do manual labor. He wanted automated express service like civilized countries provide. He took his clothes, found another laundrette 3 streets over, came back an hour later furious because they'd also said end of day. He demanded to know why British businesses were so resistant to speed. I told him speed costs more. He asked about pricing. Our rate was actually cheaper than his hotel service. He accused me of proving his point about British inefficiency, that cheap and slow shouldn't be the only option. He paid for hotel laundry at triple the price to get his shirts back in 3 hours. I run a bed and breakfast in Cornwall. Last week, an American guest mentioned at breakfast that British people were surprisingly pleasant despite having a reputation for coldness. She'd spent 3 days here and everyone had been lovely. Her husband agreed, said they'd expected standoffish attitudes based on what they'd read online but instead found warmth everywhere. I thanked them, said they'd been quite nice as well. The wife's smile faltered. She asked if quite nice meant we had issues with their stay. I explained it was a compliment. She asked if they'd done something wrong, if they'd been too loud, too demanding. Her husband started reviewing their behavior, listing everything they might have messed up. I repeated they'd been wonderful guests. The wife said wonderful was clear but quite nice sounded hesitant, like I was being polite about actual problems. They checked out an hour early. I'd given them exactly the kind of compliment I'd give anyone. They left confused about whether they'd been welcomed or tolerated, never quite understanding that in Britain, saying someone's quite nice is about as warm as we get without making everyone uncomfortable. Maybe that's the whole problem in one breakfast conversation.